everybody, Stephanie from Sarcastic Sewist again. I am back to show you how to sew up the beautiful Sherry dress from 5 out of 4 Patterns. It is a brand new pattern and I'm completely in love. It's got this really great little side tie, which adds great definition to the waist, which is one of my favorite things. It's just really beautiful and it's surprisingly simple. So I picked this beautiful double brush poly from Sly Fox Fabrics. It was a Sly buy a while ago. I don't even know if it's still available. If it is, I will link the specific fabric in the comments below. If it's not, I'll just link you straight to their double brush poly because their double brush poly is amazing. But they do this great deal, usually every week, but it varies, where they offer a specific fabric for about $5 a yard with a max of 4 yards, which is a steal. But they do this and you can buy the 4 yards, plus they have flat rate shipping. So you can buy those 4 yards and then fill a box and get some other stuff. So I'm really excited to see how this dress shapes up in the double brush poly. I made my first tester in an ITY and it's luxurious. I love how it fits. I love how it feels. I'm super excited to add another one to my closet. So I did choose the dress length for this one. There's also a top length included in the pattern, which is fantastic. I love the options, so you don't have to think about the math of where's it going to hit me? How much length do I need to take off or add or whatever, which is awesome. So I really am loving dresses these days. Now that I'm not working in a lab, I'm working from home, I wear them a lot. So I'm super excited to add another one to my closet. And this I also did, I think she calls it a drop sleeve. It's the shortest sleeve option. We have nope, this must be the cap sleeve. We have a cap sleeve, a drop sleeve, and then there's also some long sleeve options. So there's lots of options to really personalize this cute little side tie thing into what you need in your closet. It's just these 5 pieces. You'd need obviously sleeves if you added the long sleeves as well, but it's so simple that I'm really excited to get started. So I'm gonna dive right in. The first step is to take both the front and the back pieces and take this beautiful tie on the side and just fold it in half right sides together. So there's this, let me get started clipping. There's this great little, almost kind of like a cutout dart going on in the side. And that's what helps give definition and coverage to the side while still allowing you to kind of pull it toward the front a little bit to tie it to give really beautiful waist shaping. Like it just looks so good on, obviously I have a little bit of a curvy figure, a little bit. I have a very curvy figure. So I really like things that accentuate my waistline. I think that they're very slimming, which is obviously a look that I'm going for. If that's not a look you're going for, that's perfectly okay. But it's something that makes me feel comfortable, and when I'm comfortable, I feel beautiful, and that makes me happy. So this is what we're gonna do with each of this is the back piece. Just clip the right sides together. Just kind of basically fold the top completely in half along this tie, and then just stitch this. I think it was a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Please double check your pattern before sewing. I tend to wing things, but since I'm testing, I'm gonna double check this, this seam allowance, take this to my machine, and when I get to this corner, just make sure I drop that needle and turn before coming down the next direction. I think that I'm supposed to be using either like a lightning stitch or a stretch stitch or just a lengthened straight stitch, because this isn't under a lot of stretching pressure while wearing it. You don't really need a stretch stitch, so a lengthened straight stitch should be just fine. You just definitely don't want to sew it on a serger. The serger, this point is way too sharp to sew it on a serger. So you could theoretically come in and like finish your edges up to a point and then finish your edges for the tie. But since this is a nice knit and it's not curling, it's not gonna do anything. It just feels like a lot of extra work. So I'm just gonna do the same clipping to my front piece, take it to my machine, and then come back and show you the next step. Okay. So we have our tie sewn on both our front and our back. It was indeed a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which I'm super glad I double checked just in case. So I have some very fine points where I need them on the pattern, and the next step is going to be to clip. So you need to clip all the way in to your stitches, but not through them, because if you go through them, you'll have a hole. But in order to get a nice clean turn, you want to get as close to those stitches as possible on all of these turn points. So the inside turn where it's a very steep turn, I like to create a nice like even angle along the outside one. And then right at the tip as well, you kind of want to just snip off that excess fabric. And this just helps give you a nice clean tie that looks really beautiful once you've turned it right sides out. And will just look really nice and give you a nice polished finish. So there we go, all the way to the stitches but not through. I use the very, very tip of my scissors. If you use somewhere deeper in your scissors, you're much more likely to accidentally close your hand or be startled by a kitten or a kid or whatever it is that distracts your life. And we just don't want to accidentally cut off the tie, because then you have a weird shaped dress that isn't going to get you anywhere. So the next step is just to turn that tie right side out. And you can do most of it with your fingers. If you need help, I keep a sewing chopstick. It has not been used for food, I promise, but I keep a sewing chopstick in here because it's really great to have that dull point to push out ties and straps and all kinds of narrow things. So it's super easy to turn this one out, except for the very tip. I just need the chopstick for the tip, just the tip. So I've sewn all of those seams. 5 out of 4 does use a 3/8 inch seam allowance for most things, other than that first step. So I use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And I just kind of wanted to show you what batch sewing looks like when it comes off of my serger. So I just leave basically no space in between. The space that ends up in there is just from the machine grabbing the new thing and pushing the rest through. So I just grab my scissors and clip them apart, and I have sewn all the seams that are ready all at once and saved myself the trouble of walking back and forth basically around my table. Okay, so it turns out my camera definitely cut out in the middle of that. So what I'm in the middle of doing is just quartering my band, my facings, and then the corresponding neckband and arm size on the garment. I think it cut out right in the middle of me explaining after how I batch sew. So I've got it all separated. I've already quartered one arm side, one facing, and my neckband. So I'm gonna quarter this other one really quick because it's so easy. It seems so complicated, but all you have to do is I like to place a clip right at the seam line and just hold that centered over my finger. And then the bottom is the next quarter, not corner. I think I'm a little flustered from my camera malfunction. And then you can line those two up matching here, and then these are your next 2 quarter points. And I do like to do one at a time and still double check them in between just to make sure that I'm getting it right, because if you don't get your quarters quite right, you can get some weird pulling, particularly through the arm side. So if this quarter is just a little bit shorter on here than say the next quarter down, this one will be a little bit loose, and this can have some pulling, and that can increase some of those lines you see on garments, which are typically related to fit issues. But if we can eliminate bad quartering, you can kind of help eliminate some of those things to help address some fitting issues. So the neckband is quartered the same way, but you just fold it right sides together first. The facing will be turned completely inside the garment and top stitched in place, but the neckband will be pressed up, the seam allowance down, and the band up away from the garment. And you'll actually see that. So right sides facing out, both right sides together. There's a nice fold in the half of that. And then I just wanted to make sure that you take note when you are quartering an arm side or a neck opening, I guess is the word I'm going to go with, on a garment, is you have 2 seams for both of those, but they aren't necessarily always the quarter points. So I always start at the underarm, and I just want to mark that quarter point and then line these up along the seam line. Not necessarily along the edge of the garment, but right at that 3/8 inch seam allowance, just to make sure that you're lining it up appropriately. And it looks like this quarter point is just to the back, which is pretty common. They're pretty often just to the back of the neck seam line, which works out really well because I like to press all of my seams toward the back. I like to push them toward the back of the garment. That's how my grandma taught me to sew. I'm sure that there's a reason for it that I don't actually know. I just know that that's how I was taught to treat seams, is if you're choosing between the front and the back, it goes toward the back. If you know why, please comment and let me know, because I'd love to have that information. So then you match up those two clips and walk out to the side to find the next quarter point, and then do the same thing just on the other side. For the neckline, to find the quarter points, you just want to line up those two shoulder seams. Those are not your quarter points. That is very rarely going to be a quarter point on a neckline unless you're making something very high neck. Your quarter points are typically going to be somewhere in this area of the neckline. So you line those up so that you can find center back and center front, which of course you can always mark those when you're cutting. Sometimes I just do like a little 1/8 inch snip with my scissors right at that neckline. But one, this wasn't cut on the fold, so I didn't already have a quick, easy reference for it in the first place. But also, sometimes when you sew, things shift and things get a little bit off, and I just like to double check it when I can to make sure that I'm really marking that right spot. So I've got my center front and center back. I'm just lining those up and then walking along that seam line all the way till I find my other quarter point. And I'm just marking that, and then I do the same thing on the other side. And there is that quarter point. So now I've got everything quartered, and all I'm going to do is match quarter points. So I'll show you the neckband, and then I think I'll quarter the arm size, the arm facings, and take them to my machine, and then we'll come back and do everything else together. But basically what you do is you pick, I like to put the seam at the center back. Some people actually align it with a shoulder seam and then quarter from that shoulder seam, which I think is really cool. If you want that seam to match just another seam, that's one really cool way to do it. I typically put them in center back, and then I put the seam at the side seam when I'm matching on the arm side. So I just match up those clips, and sometimes I am color prejudiced, so I'll take off the color that I like least, or keep the color I like most. Sometimes I'm just, it's whatever. Am I the only one who does that? Who's like, oh, I like this color better than that color, or this color looks better with the other clip that I left in there. I think that's just a fun perk of having so many different color clips to work with, which I think is really cool. So I am just matching up my quarter points. And if you are a new sewist or you're not super comfortable with neckbands, I would definitely pull this top, because your neckband is going to be shorter than your neck opening. And that's just to help keep it flush against your body once you're done sewing. So if you're pretty new, I recommend pulling it just taut and adding another clip in between. It doesn't have to be at an 1/8 marking. You don't have to 1/8 it. But I think that it just really helps you work in smaller segments as you're sewing, which I think takes some of the scary away, because neckbands can be really scary. They're the first thing people really notice on a garment. And if you mess it up, you feel like, even if it's not true, you feel like that's all anyone is looking at. So add extra clips if you need to. Have them clipped completely all the way around if that's what you need to do to get comfortable sewing neckbands. I think once you get comfortable, it's a pretty easy thing to do, but until then, it's so scary and a little bit frustrating to deal with. So I'm just going to match the quarter points on my arm facings, and then I'm going to serge all 3 of those in place and then come right on back. Right. So I've got my neckband and both of my arm facings on. I have also pressed them. It's super, super important to press. I cannot stress this enough. It really cleans up the garment. It really takes something from homemade to handmade with love and attention to detail. So I really like to use a lot of steam. It's particularly helpful on neckbands. When you're installing them, you have to stretch the band to fit the opening. And it can be really hard to find that beautiful balance between stretch to fit and stretching the opening. And when you stretch the opening, you can get some waviness and you can kind of stretch out your fabric, and then it just doesn't look very neat. But unless you've fully stretched it beyond the recovery of the fabric, you can add some steam to that, and that'll typically help the fabric recover and bounce back to its original shape. So some steam can really help with that too if you accidentally overstretched, or if your feed isn't quite right, if your tension isn't quite right on your machine. It'll help with some of those problems to kind of self-correct. So please remember to steam just as much as the fabric will let you do it. Always use a test fabric or a test piece of fabric before taking the steam to the garment. And also maybe have a neater work area. Please don't look behind me. I had to take the paper down and then press, and then put the paper back up. It's a whole thing. I will eventually clean this room, and then I won't have to feel like you might be judging me. But you know what? Judge away, because it's really messy in here. Don't look. Just focus right here. So the next step is actually, since I'm going to be working in batches again, this is actually going to be the last bit. We're going to turn the sleeve facing to the wrong side, which we've already started that process by pressing. That process is already so much easier simply by pressing, but you just fold it to the wrong side. I like to cheat it a little bit to the wrong side, and I just mean like I pull just a little bit more, like a scant 1/16 of an inch more than centering that seam along the fold, just so that I'm sure that the facing is truly not going to peek out on me. I really like it to stay where I put it, okay? I also forgot to talk about when I was quartering and lining things. When I have a band or a facing on a sleeve, I like to nest my underarm seams, and that just means that I point the garment one toward the back of the garment, but the band or facing toward the front of the garment, so that they sit and fold opposite directions. And that just helps really reduce the bulk at that seam, which helps my serger in the first step and my cover stitch for when I have to top stitch. But it also is just more comfortable when you're wearing. You just reduce some of the bulk at that seam where you do have more layers of fabric plus all that thread, and it can get a little bit much. So we now have one arm facing pointed to the inside and clipped in place. And what you kind of have to do when you do this is, just like when you install it, you have to stretch the band to fit. Because if I were to just turn this in, I would rapidly run out of band before I'm fully turned to the wrong side for top stitching. So you just kind of stretch it to that opening width, the original width of that arm opening, and clip there. And then it scrunches back up, and that's perfectly okay. When I take it to the cover stitch, I will once again stretch just a little bit as I'm sewing to get a beautiful top stitch on that. I already did the other side because I didn't think you wanted me to watch me do two. So those are both ready for me to top stitch. So you can choose to top stitch the neckband if you want. My neckband looks really good, and I am not going to top stitch it. And I'm just going to be really honest. When I top stitch neckbands, they only turn out really pretty like 72% of the time. Maybe 65. Don't tell anyone I said that. So particularly when I'm testing, unless it's completely required, I generally opt not to do it. I know practice makes perfect, but I don't want to. I don't want to risk it. And I have to do it on some things, and that's where I get my practice in. So that's what I'm going with. So the next step is actually to try this on before you hem. I 100% did that off camera. This isn't that kind of channel. So I tried this on, and I'm really happy with a little bit of a shallower seam allowance. I think this calls hem allowance. I think this calls for a 5/8 inch hem allowance, and I'm doing just a 1/2 inch, which is just fine. I mean, it's an 1/8 of an inch. If we're being clear here, it's 1/8 of an inch. It does nothing. But the step does say to check before you hem, and so I just want to take a slightly narrower hem just to give myself that extra 1/8 of an inch. I am working on loving my legs and loving shorter dresses, and I'm there 90% of the time. I would even say maybe 95% of the time. But just for that 1% where 1/8 of an inch is going to make a difference for me, I'm just going for it. I'm just going to take a slightly narrower hem allowance, continue pinning all the way around this hem. And because so in 5 out of 4 patterns, I typically run a 3X on top down to a 5X from a booty because I have a booty. So the hem is not small. It's a 5X in fact. So it's a good bit to pin around, but making my way around, and then I'm just going to take these 3 things to the cover stitch. You could also use any stretch stitch on your regular machine. You could use a zigzag. That's not my favorite. Before I had my cover stitch, I mostly cursed a lot while using a twin needle. I hated every minute of it, but it does give a more beautiful finish for me, and that is just my personal opinion. You can use other stitches. You just need a stretch stitch for both of these. Despite this looking rather large because I'm a 5X, it's not a very full skirt. So you do need that, like on a circle skirt, you don't necessarily need a stretch stitch because you're never going to be hitting that hemline while you're walking. But on this, you might be hitting that hemline when you're walking and when you're sitting. So you do need that stretch stitch so that the fabric can stretch with you as you move. So if you're using a regular machine or a cover stitch, just take that to the machine, top stitch at the arm side, do the neckband if that's what you want to do, and then do the hem. And we're just going to give it a press at the very end and we'll be done. I'll be right back. Okay, so we're all set. I top stitched the hem and both arm sides, and I gave it a really good press and moved the paper back and forth. Please don't judge. And I love how this turned out. I'm super excited. It's almost 9 o'clock. So there's definitely not light to take pictures tonight. So I'll do my little photo shoot tomorrow because that's the end of every testing process for me, is to actually put some stuff on my face, maybe brush my hair, and then take some beautiful pictures so that I can help sell this pattern, because they really put a lot of work into it, and I think it's really beautifully done. I really love how the tie comes together. I think it looks really nice. It's very beautiful. It pulls it from the back to really create some beautiful shaping right at the waistline where I like it. It's most flattering on me. So a couple of tips from sewing the facings on. I'm gonna keep calling them bands. The facings on. You might have noticed that when I was clipping, the garment was still inside out. Yes. And you might have said, Stephanie, are you a crazy person? Everything is done. You can turn it right sides out. But I have to tell you, when I'm sewing in the round for a small opening, like an arm side or a neckband, or like a leg hem, anything smaller than like a skirt or a shirt, really. I like the garment to be wrong sides out. I really like to be able to put it under my machine inside out so that all of the garment is on top, so I can see the rest of the garment. There's nothing accidentally catching underneath my presser foot. I don't have to worry about anything like that because I can see it all piled right here inconveniently in the way while I'm working, and annoying me, but at least it's not annoying me by getting caught under and then I'm sitting here with a seam ripper, swearing, probably getting a drink or two, and then swearing some more. So video of the final product modeled tomorrow. But that was a really quick sew. Just a few. I will stop saying in some of these videos eventually. Okay, I probably won't. So completely done now. Such an easy sew. If I had done sleeves instead of a facing, I think it would have actually been even a little bit faster because you just attach the sleeve and then you hem the sleeve and it's super fast. I almost said but I did it. So I'm super excited to see this fabric on and how the dress fits and really show off these beautiful colors. I'm just completely in love with them. I love this dress. I know my sister's going to be asking me for one, so maybe don't let her see it. Do you think she can be a photographer with her eyes closed? I'll have to ask her. So anyway, back tomorrow with a beautiful finished video of how this looks modeled, and I can't wait to share it with you. Okay, so hi, this is the finished women's 5 out of 4 Sherry dress. I super love the fit of it. I feel amazing. I feel like it really accentuates my curves, shows off my booty. And just generally I feel really good in it. I think the double brush poly from Sly Fox Fabrics was a really great choice. I think this dress really shows off the print really nicely. Because it's such a large floral, sometimes they can get a little bit lost. But I love all the features, I love all the details. I really hope that you enjoy this pattern as well. Check the links below for a link to the pattern and to Sly Fox for their wonderful fabric, as well as to my website, sarcasticsewist.com, to check out more from me. Thank you!